just either a slightly different from what they are, or we talk, we see things are not normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. If you have a story of something strange, if you've encountered a cryptid, Bigfoot, Mothman, or if you've seen a ghost, had alien contact, anything strange or unusual, something with the paranormal, we'd love to hear your story. Or if there's a story you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com. Good evening, Allison.
Good evening, Timothy.
For anyone curious, Soraya put a video of me and our recording studio here up, which I've neatened up, of course, since he took the video. Had I known he was going to be shooting video,
we probably would have cleaned.
I would have straightened up a bit, but it's on the Where Did the Road Go YouTube, if people want to look at it.
It doesn't include any photos of us, though, right?
I'm in it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm featured prominently throughout the video. I'm giving the tour, and you can tell I'm very awkward. I think I could tell. I don't know. I
really feel like we both have faces for radio.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Mr. Joshua Cutchin arrives in 2 days, less than 2 days, something like that.
Will he be bringing all of the Fae with him?
That is a question for Josh. And then Josh and I will be traveling together to the X-Filers United Convention, which is at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Warwick, Rhode Island. That's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, April 26th, 27th, and 28th. Josh and I will both be giving individual presentations on Friday. I believe mine's the first one, so get there early if you want to see me. I think I'm 10 in the morning. And then Josh and I will be giving another presentation together on Saturday.
Oh, that's cool.
Josh and I will both have copies of our books to sign. I will have art prints. I will have my music. I will have Strange Familiars stuff. So stop by and see us if you're in the area. That's the X-Filers United Convention this coming Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So tonight's show, I'll be talking to Evan, who relates, first of all, his wife's experience. She did not want to come on the show. She is, however, sitting there next to him, or at least in the same room, I believe.
As he tells her story.
As he tells her story and correcting him and adding details, which is fun.
I love that.
But she had this kind of like woke up sleep paralysis thing and had this like, she said it looked like ink dropped in water. This thing with like tendrils that moved. And then she was able to move and it was still there. Like after she kind of like got out of the sleep paralysis thing, she said it was
There's just something in the room with her. Like
yeah, really, really interesting, really creepy. And then Evan tells a really cool story about a creepy graveyard in Texas too, which may have multiple things going on there.
Besides dead people.
Besides dead people, yes. We're talking with Evan, who wrote me about some strange things that happened in his place, in his residence, possibly relative to sleep paralysis, but let's talk about it.
So it's kind of a weird thing. So this actually happened to my wife. I'm going to preface that, but she's gave me permission to kind of talk about it. And she's not one to have any sleep paralysis or anything like that before, has never really had an interest in this stuff. Usually it's too spooky, and she doesn't want me to talk about it. Whereas I've had about a 20-year interest in this kind of stuff. So I'm going to preface and talk about that she is quitting smoking, and so she thought in order to like help with the side effects of Nicoderm to take it at night, which is not what you're supposed to do. I should have guessed it, I just wasn't paying attention, but that level of nicotine into your bloodstream at nighttime, because it messes with your rhythm cycle and stuff. So yeah, that's naturally sort of just my first thing to look at on it. The story itself got a little weird, because just normal sleep paralysis is stuff that I have an interest in, but I don't necessarily immediately see it as paranormal or supernatural or anything like that. It's always interesting, like kind of the archetypes and the things people see constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting, but it's hard to buy into anything when we don't know. But with this, so I'm just going to say that was an element on there. So I guess please don't buy Nicoderm patches to try to if you don't need them, people. So so according to her, she wanted me to preface that she's a light sleeper, and so this is probably around 2:30 in the morning. I was going to maybe draw a map of the room just to get a better effect, but this thing was close, whatever happened. So she wakes up feeling a presence, is what she said. So her side of the bed is right next to the doorway that leads into the hallway where into the rest of the house. So she wakes up and can't move, sleep paralysis stuff. But then she sees this thing coming by, and the only way that she could really describe it, it looked like ink dropped into water. Like, it was sort of this smoky, amorphous. It had depth, and it was somewhat transparent, but more opaque in parts. So there was like definitely a three-dimensional type thing to it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It didn't have any sort of feature, like any figure to it, but it kind of rolled past her a little bit. Seemed to stop as if it knew it was noticed, which is kind of indicative of this kind of stuff too. Then it turned towards her. So at this point, she's sitting there kind of thinking like, oh, this got to be a dream. This got to be a dream. I can't move. This got to be a dream. So she turns her eyes away and looks over and can see, my phone blinking, with the messenger or whatever update light it had against the ceiling, turns back, and it's still there when she, turns her eye back, which is distressing because usually when you have a little bit of a glitch in the matrix when you wake up, usually kind of turning or moving your eyes kind of makes it go away, which is not what happened. And so it kind of bent over to the best it could, and then she felt that pressure on her chest that you hear about with other sleep paralysis stories, and then these cold, tendrily hand things kind of went across her face, and she said it felt like, if you had a cup of ice and just put it up against your face, and it kind of moved up and around. And at this point, she said that she kind of regained some mobility, so she started trying to scratch my elbow awake, and that didn't work. And started scratching at my elbow, and she just corrected me. It was her face that got hit first in the chest. So then she scratched at my elbow, and I didn't wake up, so she kind of regained some motion, and I don't know, from what I've heard of other sleep paralysis cases, usually these things go away before you regain mobility, I think. But this thing was still there, so she kind of hopped up. She said it very octopus-like receded into the wall, kind of jumped backwards, and then she flicked on the light and was gone. So at this point, she's freaking out a little bit. She starts feeling the air around it. She said it was real cold in that hallway, and I'll kind of contest to that. So we have two dogs, and this is the part that made it even weirder. That's the dogs seem to kind of react to this. We have a pit bull and a Jack Russell Rat Terrier mix, and the Rat Terrier mix has a kennel kind of in that same corridor area near her bed, just on the far side of the wall, and he was looking like, you ever seen a Jack Russell or a Rat Terrier when they get that intense stare?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're just staring, not whining, not wagging his tail, just looking straight at that spot where it was at. The ears at 9 or 11, just kind of there. So she gets up to check on the other dog and just kind of see what's going on. And the pit bull was underneath. So we have a back door that leads to the back door from the bedroom, which is on my side of the bed. So she goes around, and Cronus is kind of lazy. He's our pit, and he'll look out the window every once in a while. That's usually Booker's job. He's usually the guy patrolling the windows and looking at them and stuff. And he stuck his head in. He was full on underneath the curtain, just staring out there, not wagging his tail, not responding. Usually when they're up and about, when we wake up, the first thing they do is look at us and wag their tails and expect some sort of treat or something.
Right. Yeah.
But he was dead quiet, just looking up, just staring out the back door. So she wakes me up with not mentioning any of the spooky stuff, just going, honey, there's a draft in the house. You got to check. And I just went, well, she goes, I know it's silly, but, there could be a door open. I need you to check the house. So I did the husband thing, marched my way through the house. All the doors and stuff were locked, and nothing was inside, nothing disturbed. The only weird thing, I guess I just try to use the logical side of it. First, there was a weird pressure system coming through a warm front, but there's this weird kind of tendrily draft on the floor, and that's not usually how it moves in our house. It just seemed weird, so I was like, yeah, there is a weird draft. I've never felt that here before, and we've been here for about a year. Then I came back, and she regaled me with what happened, but I was going to note that when I got up and I saw Cronos, and he was still underneath there. And actually, I let the dogs out right before I checked the house. Now that I remember, I was kind of grumpy, and I let them out, then checked the house, and came back to let them in. And when I opened up the door, usually Cronos, again, he's a lazy boy. He don't like to be outside in the cold. He don't like any of that. But they were kind of near the porch, but Booker was and they both were facing away from the door. Even after I opened it, they were both fixated on something outside, but they weren't like whining and barking and running after stuff. It was like a possum or something. It was really weird. So I called, Booker turned and came inside. When I called him, Kronos kind of stood there looking, just staring off into the, at the fence at something for another, 5-10 seconds, and kind of got up, took one last look, and came in. And then I got the details on the story.
Let's describe this entity again. We'll call it an entity, and then we'll talk a little bit more about sleep paralysis.
Yeah, so from what she said, and the best thing is I guess you're an artist too, right? Mm-hmm. If I remember. So you ever just drop some black ink into water or something like that?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think our food coloring or anything like that. If you just drop that into water and kind of it's not like smoke, but it's definitely it moves aquatically and stuff like that. So it was kind of this, that's what she described it as. She showed a few pictures of just what it kind of looked like and what it moved like. Mm-hmm. And she also noted that she's farsighted, so when it was closer to her face, she actually had she had problems looking at it, it was actually physically there.
Did it have like a face or anything discernible like that?
No, she said the best you could say is that it seemed to have, if there was some sort of, I guess, cephalization, right? It did seem to kind of move down towards her from the top. Mm-hmm. See if she confirms that.
About how tall was it?
She had. I did a test with her because I went ahead and tested all the stuff. It's hard to tell because of how close it was, because it's her. Basically, you hop out of her bed on her side, you're right in front of that doorway where it was. And so she said it was about my height. I'm about 6'3", so it was man-sized. Mm-hmm. She couldn't see the bottom of it, I don't think.
Here's the thing, so sleep paralysis generally after you're up and moving, it's done. Yeah. So the fact that am I understanding correctly, did she still see it after she was up?
Yeah, so she was it was sitting there touching her face when she was trying to scratch my elbow and trying to get me awake. I was dead asleep until she turned the lights on and basically shook me up. I was deep in sleep. And then it was still there after she got up, so she would have had to get up to get the light switch. So it was kind of just a do or die sort of thing, just it was trying to pass by, so she's thinking, okay, if you're a ghost, just do your thing, buddy. Just go on. And then eventually just decided to go turn the light on as sort of last resort in this state. And when she turned the light on, she said it receded, and then when the light came on, it was gone.
Wow. Yeah, see, that's unusual. One of the things that a lot of the Flannel Man witnesses I've talked to have sleep paralysis, but they said, I'd gotten up to get a glass of water or whatever it was, and that's when I saw it. So it's unlike other sleep paralysis in that. I'm not saying that's 100% it's not sleep paralysis. I'm just saying it's unlike other sleep paralysis.
That's why I kind of was I should email a Strange Familiars on this one.
Yeah, it's really cool, and the fact that you were able to feel the cold draft, and it was unusual. You'd not felt this before or since.
We had the heater on the house, and the only weird thing about it is pressure systems. And and there's some, I guess, paranormal hunters that'll use barometric pressure as sort of a thing, and maybe it does have something to do with it, because it almost felt a little warmer outside, and we had the heater on and everything, which was kind of weird too. Mm-hmm. I guess there was a bit of a warm front coming in. So, but that draft, the way that felt, it was like a weird tendril across my feet as I went through the living room on my way back after checking the house.
Right. Has your wife experienced sleep paralysis before?
No, she's never had sleep paralysis before. Because that night I was kind of, well, hon, that's just sleep paralysis. People see things when that happens. We watched the Nightmare she watched maybe 10 minutes of the Nightmare on Netflix, so it really didn't stick with her. So she's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, yeah, nobody's ever been hurt by it or anything. You're going to be fine. It happens to a lot of people, usually not repeatedly, though. Mm-hmm. And then she was like, I think that gave her enough solace to get to bed. But she wanted to note that the air was really cold in that corridor when she got up, which was true. Mm-hmm. And
that's where the entity came from originally.
Yeah, that's the spot. And it was, I don't know if I noticed it immediately going through, but I did notice something weird across my feet, and I checked the fireplace flue was shut, everything was shut up pretty well. I said, the only weird thing was just that pressure system coming through. But with sleep paralysis, they usually go away when you regain your mobility and your control.
Right.
So it was just a really weird, really strange thing. And the dogs reacting, because my dogs don't act like that, and that's the
right. Yeah. It's like this multi-factor thing where you got the dogs acting weird, the remnants of the temperature, which is unusual, the fact that she woke up and whatever was still there is unusual. It's just like this kind of checklist of things that don't usually go along with plain old sleep paralysis.
Well, it's weird. I was talking to a friend of mine about chaos magic, and hopefully I didn't make this come in. He was doing some stuff with magic practice and stuff like that. He's an old friend of mine. We're just talking about weird stuff. And yeah, I don't dive too deeply into stuff. I'll just have times of the year where I just want to go back down that road and go back into paranormal research. I'll listen to some podcasts and stuff. But I was thinking, man, I haven't had anything weird happen in a while. Then boom.
Here's the thing. I think, and I just recorded another podcast with someone else regarding sleep paralysis. And I don't know if we'll gang these two stories together or where they will be, because I until I do editing, I'm not quite sure where these things will fall. So listeners, you may or may not have already heard the story I'm talking about. But in any case, we were talking on that, and I said, I'm no longer sure that sleep paralysis is just simply a way to explain away paranormal events. And by that I mean, I started asking what came up naturally with these flannel man witnesses. It came up naturally that so many of them were talking about sleep paralysis that I just started asking every flannel man witness I talked to, have you ever had sleep paralysis in your life? Usually it's not associated with their flannel man sightings. It's just at other times. And the answer is overwhelmingly yes. So then I just started asking everyone I talked to, every paranormal witness, no matter Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, whatever it is, everyone I talked to, have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? Overwhelmingly, people who have paranormal experiences have also experienced sleep paralysis. So
yeah,
it's almost where I'm wondering if it's not some kind of side effect or another manifestation of it in another weird way that we don't quite get yet. Maybe sometimes it can be just sleep paralysis, and that's all it is. But I feel like there's it's somehow connected to these other paranormal things, and how it is I haven't quite put that together yet. I'm talking 75% since I started asking, I think, of people who have, experienced anything paranormal have also experienced sleep paralysis.
And also she had one last note. It felt like a neurotoxin, I guess, was like, wearing off of her as she regained control. I don't know if that's normal, because I never, it's these little details that people don't always go over, but she's got an eye for detail and stuff like that.
Right. And now, in what sense? In the sense that she was able to regain movement?
Yeah, she felt like it was almost like, as she regained control, felt like it was just kind of slipping back in. I don't know.
I mean, I've had sleep paralysis, and
okay.
I would say that as far as what I experienced, that's, pretty par for the course. The times where I haven't just fallen back asleep and, woken up screaming, however many minutes or hours later. Yeah, I'm familiar with that feeling at least. But,
okay.
However, never have I gotten up, and still had any remnants of it once I'm up and about.
Yeah, she kind of, when she gets in the panic mode, she usually actually kind of goes cold as a cucumber and kind of goes like, bull shooter on it. So I'm glad she did, because I would have, I don't know if I would have forgotten these little details, but she's pretty good at kind of picking up on those little sensations and stuff.
Sure, yeah. Now, has she experienced anything else ever, like any other just weird stuff that she'd be willing to talk about?
She mentioned a couple small things that I don't have a lot of stuff on. I think one thing in particular was, again, I got a couple things that I had to go on to, but I think she told a story about it was like a ghost playing piano sort of thing when she was a kid, and I didn't know about these for years. She just kind of answers it nonchalant, like, yeah. And I think it was I'll wait for her to maybe get the exact relation, but apparently she saw some lady playing piano at her grandfather's house up north. I've never met her, seen that house in person. But apparently she was, child, and saw this lady playing piano, memorized the melody, then talked to her grandpa about it, and he was like, well, no, that's so-and-so. How do you know that song? So,
wow.
That was one, and then I think another time she talked about, this is before we were together, but Kronos was there for it, but apparently he didn't react to it. He's about 8. We've been together probably about 6 or 7 years now. But apparently she's in the backyard and just having a smoke, which she's trying to quit. Again, I barely remember this, but apparently this figure walked through the yard and kind of disappeared when it got out of the moonlight or something like that.
Like a shadow figure kind of thing, or?
No, I think it was full-bodied. You didn't really tell me the details. You're very nonchalant about it, dear.
Well, it was less about getting the specifics of these others, because we were talking about the one case, and more about noting that there have been other events.
Yeah. So she could see it was kind of like she could see the lady in the light of the sunlight coming through the window. Mm-hmm. And then the guy and then another guy who walked through her backyard, so she's an adult. He kind of walked through, and he was in the moonlight, and just kind of was. This figure was. I don't think he was wearing flannel, as far as I know. I think I tried to ask that just to make sure. And he reacted and looked at the dogs, and then just sort of. And I think he went under the shade of a tree and disappeared, which is kind of a weird one.
Yeah, that is weird.
I just barely learned about these, and he was blue.
Blue, that's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if that relates to anything else, but.
I mean. Only
plain T-shirt.
Only in that. I mean, every now and then people report blue entities.
The skirt was blue. Is what she was saying.
What's that?
It was blue. It was just a plain blue T-shirt.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it wasn't like his skin was blue.
But other than that, like I said, I've just sort of milked these stories out of her now because I've kind of, she's not really into this kind of stuff. She gets spooked pretty easy.
Yeah, my wife's the same way, and then she's saddled doing a paranormal podcast suddenly. But she's not a big fan of this stuff. Even her like Flannel Man thing, I had to, she still doesn't like to talk about it too much. When I interview other people with Flannel Man, sometimes she won't even listen. Sometimes she's curious because it's the one thing. Mm-hmm. It's the one thing she did see, but sometimes she doesn't want any part of it. She's like, nah, I don't need to hear that.
I tried to ask my brother because he vaguely remembered it. He used to have some night terrors and stuff as a kid, but apparently the one that kind of creeped me out as a kid, I was probably around 10 or so, maybe 9. He woke up and said there was a man in his room, and he said he was wearing, I remember, a red shirt. I don't know if it was flannel, though, because my brother's a little developmentally kind of a little bit slower, so I don't know if he would have known. I don't think I would even know how to describe flannel at that point, so I don't know if he would have at the time. Mm-hmm. But apparently he woke up, screaming to that.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I don't know if night terror, stuff like that, he really can't remember very well. I asked him if he remembered, and he goes, yeah. He was, wait, was that you? I'm like, no, it wasn't me, bud.
Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you, patrons, so much. Without you, we could not do the show. $3 a month gets you extra shows. We guarantee at least one extra show a month. Often we deliver more than that. You can go to patreon.com/strangefamiliars, and that's where you can sign up to become a patron, get extra shows. If you want something a little extra, you can get patches and t-shirts and buttons and all kinds of stuff. A set of my books, that's been pretty popular lately, where you can get all 4 books at once. There's all kinds of stuff there. You can find that, again, at patreon.com/strangefamiliars. But even just going in at the $3 level is a huge help for us. It really helps us make the show. And you get all the extra content.
So if you've listened to everything and you want an extra 50 shows or something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure how many we're up to as far as patron shows at this point, but we've done at least one a month since the very first month we started the show. So we're up to episode 87, I believe this is. So that's a lot
don't make
of content.
Me do the math, but
and some months we've done 3 patron shows, some months we've done 2. There's a lot there for you to check out. So if you'd like to help us continue to make the show, patreon.com/strangefamiliars. Another way to help, if you don't like the idea of a subscription, you can do a one-time donation. There's a paypal.me link in the show notes at strangefamiliars.com, and you can see that there. And of course, as all podcasts say, another way to help is to share the podcast on social media and give us nice 5-star reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, did you have some experiences you wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, this one I kind of wanted to throw by just because this is one of the. I've always had an interest in this stuff. I had friends' houses and stuff that had some kind of weird stuff, but not a lot of it happened directly to me. But it's sort of like hearing them and doing stuff with them sort of piqued my interest, which kind of maintained. So this stuff happened, I guess, between 2009 and 2011, and I'm not going to mention the name of this place.
That's fine.
So I had read an article in my college newspaper about these ghost hunters locally who, I guess, they had investigated someplace on campus. And I was like, oh, these might be kind of neat. I've never been able to go out and do this kind of stuff. I've had interest in it. So I'm like 19, I think, at this point. So about 10 years ago. And so they go, I emailed this paranormal troop, and they say, yeah, sure, we're not going to do an official investigation like, this weekend, but you can come right out with this if you want. It's just kind of like a scouting mission. We're just going to check out some places. So I was like, cool. And I met this lady. She was actually a licensed psychiatrist who did ghost hunting on the side. So she was like, yeah, we got a couple locations that we want to go look at. One we're scouting. Another one's just kind of one of our local haunts. And then another one is a place that, they weren't too sure about the last place, but she kind of teased it a little bit. So I went out with them. We checked out a couple cool graveyards. Nothing too big that went on. But then we start going to this third location, which is this tiny little graveyard. And again, why are graveyards haunted? Nobody's ever died in a graveyard. It's a big question on it, but this may pique your interest, because now that I've kind of learned a little bit more about more Bigfoot lore, thanks to you and some others, I'm a little iffy on what exactly this thing is now.
Oh, okay, yeah, bring it.
Yeah. So we drive out there. So to give a description, it's podunk, middle of nowhere. This cemetery maybe has 50 graves in it. I'm not even sure if that's like. Basically, it was this town that is no longer there. It no longer exists because I think they all died of yellow fever or something. I read somewhere. Kind of going through some county history. She claimed that there was a gravestone there where there was a Thule related symbol on it. I never found this. And at the time, there wasn't nearly enough. You couldn't find a lot of occult stuff on the internet even 10 years ago. Like, a lot of it was still kind of had a paywall around it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot easier to find now and kind of get good information on, thanks to podcasts and things like that.
Right.
So she claimed that, but her big claim was like, hey, we don't have permission to be here necessarily. We don't know, if they would mind or not. So we're not going to get out of the car. We just want to show you this place because it seems like it doesn't take long for something weird to happen here. And this was her claim, is that there was a 9-foot shadowy creature that roared and shook the car. And something wrecked their undercarriage to the point where she just got it out of the shop.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so we drove out there and we just kind of parked on the road. Nothing big happened that night, but it definitely had that feeling to it. I think, the one where you got a good spot.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know, it's kind of weird. I mean, you look into it, it's almost like you get these kind of weird optical illusion things going on, and you're just trying to keep from just, trying to decide whether it's your brain playing tricks on you or not.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of stared there for a bit, and and then we kind of drove off, and then she's like, yeah, but that's the place, man. It's pretty creepy, right? So I didn't really get back in contact with them. I don't know if they just, if she didn't check her emails very often, or I tried a couple follow-ups, or maybe I was a 19-year-old without any money, so that you don't want to, you need somebody that can buy their own equipment, probably. I'm just joking. Yeah, so I just kind of fell out of contact, but then about a year later, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back there. I'll just go on my own. So I got my car up, got my nerve up. It was, I think it was still around Halloween time, so I drove out there, made the trip, probably about 45 minutes from where I was living. Yeah, because I had to find the place, because you can find it now, so that's the reason I'm not mentioning the name of it, but it was really hard to find at the time. Google Maps wasn't as well detailed.
Right, yeah, that's what, the early days of the internet, this stuff was, I mean, there's a lot of places, like the place I talk about, Hex Hollow, and the pictures they put up that was supposedly the house of the guy who got killed down there were ridiculous. And they, one after another, these houses built in the 1970s and stuff, the guy was murdered in the 20s. And I was just, no, that's not the house. It's not the house. But that's just, people didn't know until somebody nailed it down. This is the house, that people were just guessing. So it was hard to find this stuff. Yeah. So
it took me a bit, but I managed to sort of okay, I know we left this town at this side of town. I think it was this. Okay, it's probably this road. Okay, this looks like an abandoned country road. So eventually, using that, I think satellite, I found it. It sort of marked the location, and then went out there on my own. And I didn't make it out of the car on this trip. I got there, man, and it was because it started off clear skies, and when I got there, just this clouds had gone over. It was pitch black, and you just got that feeling I wasn't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It could have just been me psyching myself out, but I just was like, I'm not going to get out of the car. I'm just going to go back.
I've done the same thing myself, where I've gotten like I'm going out tonight. I'm going by myself, and sometimes it's fine, but sometimes you get there and it's like, nah. I'm staying in the car tonight.
Yeah, I just turned back around and went back. Said, nice country drive for the night. That's the reward for the evening. So I guess about another year passes, and actually this guy was just up in town with me. He stayed for a couple days. My roommate for that year in college, who's become a very good friend of mine. We never really talked about creepy stuff, but finally, after a few drinks, we finally just got there. Like the eventual conversation you have with anybody, like, dude, you ever seen like a ghost or anything?
Right.
And so he started talking like, no, I don't think I've seen anything, but man, I want to believe, like I want to see something. And I was just like, I might got a place for you if there's any truth to these rumors. And the place seems creepy, so it's worth maybe the trip. So he goes, yeah, man, let's go. Two strapping young men head off in my little Saturn, and we go down there, and we get there, and okay. I think I went one other time during the day for a short while just to look to see if I could find that Thule symbol. It wasn't nearly as bad in the day, but it's still pretty remote. Mm-hmm. Just more so I didn't want to get like questioned by a corrupt sheriff or anything.
Right.
And so we head out there. So we do get out of the car this time. And Charles, once he gets there, his demeanor changes pretty significantly. He goes from being kind of like, yeah, man, let's go. And then he gets there and he's just like immediately just like doe-eyed going like, oh man, where are we? Because it's not a big, it's a tiny little graveyard. So I'm going to try my best to try to describe the geography of the area. It's not very big, but essentially this little plot of land is on the nestle of kind of a macaroni bend in the road, almost 90 degrees. And there's there's just kind of shrubbery and brush on the other side of it. Then on the inside of the corner is the cemetery, and about half this plot is just sort of like this. There's two gates, and the first area, the first rectangle, I guess, is just sort of just has a little pavilion there. I don't even know who that would get buried out there in this day and age, but I guess it's just for like funeral services. Mm-hmm. And then the next gate is the actual graveyard, which is I got maybe 50 graves in it, a couple maybe pecan trees if I can remember right, in there, and then a little barbed wire fence. So we get through the first gate, and I lock the gate behind us, and we start making our slow, getting our nerve up to go inside the cemetery. And he's immediately going like, God, I think I see lights, man. I'm like, just keep cool, dude. We're gonna be fine. And then we start. So from so if we're on the south end, from the east end on the other side of the road, we start hearing rustling in the bushes. And my first thought isn't, a ghost. I'm like, oh, I hope this isn't a mountain lion or a wild dog or something.
Right.
That's gonna, that's what I'm worried about in those cases.
Right.
Like, I don't want to get messed up by a wild animal. And then the rustling keeps happening, and it keeps moving around this bend. So, and we're sitting there just like trying to just trying to figure out what this thing is. Can we see something? We didn't want to have flashlights on to announce our position, but there was enough moonlight, no clouds, that we can kind of see, the road and stuff around us. Okay, the visibility wasn't too bad. And then it keeps going around. It eventually gets behind my car. Then it eventually keeps rustling until it's right across from us. Then it stops for a second. So we're just sitting there just waiting to see. I'm like, is it a deer? Is it an armadillo? What is it? And then, like, I can only describe it. It sounded like a dude running with two rakes behind him across this road towards us, but nothing was there. And so this thing just clatters, this ruckus comes towards us and stops about maybe, because we had this fence between us and the road, and it stops just short of the fence. And then about a half second later, Charles just walks towards the gate, opens my car door, and sits there with his arms crossed and says, "We're leaving." Oh. So, yeah. So I get in the car, and I'm driving. And I'm like, dude, you heard that, right? Like, that's it. And he goes like, dude, did you not get pushed? I go, what? And apparently when that thing stopped, he got physically pushed in the chest.
Wow.
And at that moment, he just had to go. Because I heard it. I didn't feel anything when it stopped, though. Mm-hmm. So we get back, and we kind of talk about it a little bit the next day, just to let him process what happened. And so then we decide to. So a few nights later, same thing's happening with a couple more friends when it comes to the drinking and spooky stories.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of our buddies, one he had some good stories, and apparently he claimed to have lived in a haunted house for some time. So, and devout Catholic, so he kind of had a handle on the stuff. And the other guy was just kind of jeering and making fun of us a little bit. But he's decided, hey man, I'm gonna go. Let's go do this. So a couple nights later, we pack up and do the same thing. So now we got 4 early 20s Texas boys, certainly brave enough to face this little remote graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So we get out. Nick, who's the Catholic, and I head forward. So we're the vanguard of this expedition.
Mm-hmm.
So we head in first. I got my nerve down. I got buddies with me. And if I got buddies, I'm pretty good. If I'm by myself, I'm kind of a sissy. But if I got buddies, I do okay.
Safety in numbers.
Yeah, safety in numbers. And so we go in, and we actually make it a couple steps into the graveyard this time, but not far. And then behind us is Charles, who's doing a little bit better this time. He's ready for it. At least he knows what to expect. And then the class clown, who's the one who's making fun of us, he's in the back lagging behind and not really too happy about going into this graveyard now. If you're seeing a pattern, it seems to go for the weakling in the group.
Mm-hmm.
The mental resolve. So we're walking and we're kind of waiting. So we're standing there letting our eyes adjust to the dark. We're inside the graveyard because, by God, I was going to get inside that graveyard at night at least once. And then and then a couple minutes later, the others catch up, and Chris, who was the guy who was kind of the jokester at first, all of a sudden, there's this domino effect where he runs into Charles, and Charles runs into us, and then we kind of turn, we're like, what the heck, dude? Like, what are you doing? Quit goofing around. And then he doesn't say anything. He just like Charles did that other night, he just turns around, walks towards the car, gets in, sits with his arms crossed, and says, "We're leaving."
Wow. And
I said, okay, because I wasn't going to keep anybody that didn't want to be there any longer.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, are you messing with us, right? He's like, no, I wasn't messing with you. I got pushed. I'm leaving. We're going right now. Nope.
Wow.
No more of this nonsense. And I said, okay. So took them home, and I graduated shortly thereafter, so I haven't been back that way since. I did get in contact with that paranormal group down there, and they said, oh yeah, I told them about this stuff. And they occasionally go down there and get some weird stuff. Not too much hard footage, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be. It's pretty creepy, but yeah. So I've had that was probably the most active area I've ever been in, and we're talking like less than 20 minutes a trip. It's
2 nights in a row, basically, right? So somebody got pushed, essentially.
Yeah, 2 trips in a row. Yeah. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there's a few nights difference, but yeah, people got pushed. He got pushed hard enough to run into this, and we're talking like a probably 6'2", 6'3", 240-pound guy.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a small dude at all.
And I mean, I know this isn't your story, but when they said that whatever was shaking their car, did they attribute that to some sort of spirit, or? Yeah,
they said maybe demon or something. Because we talk about, because this is the reason I like your show and the reason I came to you, because there's sort of like this weird conjunction going on right now, I guess, and weird stuff research where you got like the UFO guys, the Bigfoot guys, and the ghost dudes coming together going like, okay, maybe we should start sharing some notes on some stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they attribute it to some sort of unnatural, I guess inhuman, which I guess could include Bigfoot in their parlance, but because I was never, I've kind of started listening to your show some, and unfortunately, Bigfoot is sort of the litmus test for what people are, what stretches people's credulity sometimes.
It is, yeah, it absolutely is.
I have friends that are like, I'll maybe concede some stuff, but the second I hear about Bigfoot, I'm out the door.
But I think it's really interesting how, I mean, it's happened here too on Toad Road, which I write so much about. There was some.
Yeah, I've been trying to get some more info on that. I'm listening to your backlog as I go through stuff.
There's so much stuff out there that sounds like cryptid stuff, but because people were, they were ghost hunters or they were told it was haunted, they were just attributing to ghosts. Like I said, I think it's all related probably anyway. So it's not something over which to argue. It's just interesting how, if you go out looking for Bigfoot and something, even like what you experienced happened, you're going to say Bigfoot. But if you go out looking for ghosts and something like what you experienced at the graveyard I'm talking about, you're going to say, oh, ghosts. It's just very interesting how the phenomenon kind of molds itself to expectations sometimes.
Yeah, and that was my expectation at the time. But over the past, I guess, couple of years, I've been kind of, I got kind of more into the UFO stuff, even though I have zero like experience with that over the past year, just like abduction stories and stuff like that. And then, like, you get the phase stuff, and you get all these different things going on, and then the sleep paralysis stuff. And and also my wife wanted to make sure that she did not feel this was human at all, and I don't think so either, because it's almost like these things need to be observed.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a weird thing, and this reason, like you'll have multiple people see something in like a mass hallucination sort of thing, but yet there will be no physical evidence to back it up a lot of times, because cameras don't observe. I think that's just sort of been my theory on it. Like, in order to get this sort of stuff, like it's sort of, we don't have the equipment necessarily to even pick it up, and even if you did pick it up, who's going to believe it?
Yeah, I think that the reason why every photo is blurry, almost, is there's a reason for that. I think it's the wrong tool for the job in a sense. It's part of the mystery. And then when people do get evidence, it disappears an incredible amount of time. Like, if they do get hard evidence one way or another, it so often it disappears. I couldn't put a guess on a percentage, but better than 75% of the time, it disappears.
Yeah, and it's not like they got it. Like, it's I work in a I'm just vaguely I work in a mental health field, and so I work with people that are delusional and stuff quite a bit. And I can hear stories and kind of hear the difference between lying and mental illness and versus somebody that's kind of getting a real story. You do have some talented liars out there, don't get me wrong, but you listen to some of the other kind of open lines podcasts, and the ones that don't vet very well. Right, and it's not they could be telling the truth, or they, it could be anything, but you kind of listen to them, just like, oh gosh, like, I'm sorry, the demon didn't tell you its name, and it's not like there's this cold indifference that comes with these things, even if they are harassing you. I mean, it's just usually my litmus test on this kind of stuff. If something gets a little too kind of personal and dramatic, it just stretches my credulity. I'm not going to try to call them out on it, but when you got somebody that actually is, I mean, in my experience, people that do have actual hallucinations and psychosis, right? They're not really able to tell you a concise story very well. Like,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's very disjointed. It doesn't have, because honestly, and even if you're having like psychosis-based hallucinations, a lot of times your memory is going to be completely whacked during that time anyway.
Right.
So being able to remember these things and have like sort of a linear timeline of events, if you were having, I guess, more traditional types of hallucinations, it's very hard.
Right.
And
yeah.
Honestly, and I've been working in this field for a number of years now, and I've heard they never talk about ghost or alien abductions. I've heard maybe 2 alien related like stories from people, and those weren't even anything all that detailed, or it's just kind of disjointed and sort of tangential type of stuff. It is very personal, but there is sort of like, you're not a chosen one, or you get these sort of things where like, it's like the difference between watching, even in terms of television shows, like Ghost Hunters versus Paranormal State, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ghost Hunters had their problems, but for the most part, try to at least keep some sort of sense of dignity.
Right.
Whereas supposed to, like, I remember watching Paranormal State back in the day, and it was just kind of like, which is your neck of the woods, right, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, not far. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know those guys or anything, but just remember watching the show, and like they're like, supposedly like had a demon hunting them down and showing up in places, which I mean, maybe it happened, but to me it was just kind of like, makes for good television.
Yeah. The whole, I have to be careful because I get people very upset because
I don't mind on this part.
The whole demon thing it's just, I don't know. I think people like to lay their religion over things. And sometimes it fits, and sometimes it doesn't. But they really try hard to make it fit,
Well, and that's normal. You have people that believe that there are no ghosts; they're just demons trying to trick you. But the thing is, like, dude, if I'm a demon and my whole goal is to keep you away from God, the last thing I'm going to do is like reinforce your beliefs by spooking you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've had the whole, Bigfoot is a demon thing. It's like, why? Like, why? Like, really? Like, that's the most convenient form it can take. I mean, it's just back up, Yeah.
Or why is it? Because it is so unknowable and so beyond our grasp at this point that by trying to come up with some sort of rational explanation at this point is really, really just futile.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Because I think we're just now, like, I think through abstraction we're just barely able to get stuff. You were talking to somebody that was talking about Terrence McKenna like a couple of episodes ago. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like McKenna, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but the whole like psychedelic UFO thing, sort of how that fits in, and then our role as a perceiver, I think, has a lot to do with this kind of stuff, and it's really kind of weird to talk about it because it's really abstract.
No,
But
it is. I mean, and it's very difficult to explain to people, like especially to Bigfoot witnesses, that I do believe what you saw was solid, flesh and blood when you saw it. I believe at the time you saw it, it left footprints. I absolutely believe that, but I also believe it's not an animal, and that's a really hard thing to wrap your head around.
Oh yeah, I mean, then you get weird stuff like the infield poltergeist,
Mm-hmm.
which not the movie, but yeah. So I remember one of the weirder parts of that, because you had all the stuff that was happening that could not have been faked by those girls, right?
Right.
Police were watching chairs being thrown around or whatever happened, right? The police were like, the stuff's in police reports, and then I think Maurice Grossman. Honestly, he's like a paranormal research hero with his dull and dry account of the entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He was there for months, but it kind of an interesting prospect. And if you kind of look into thought forms and tulpas and sort of that sort of area, God forms, egregores, sort of stuff that you run into in magic. And then when the girl was kind of being used as a ventriloquist dummy, right? She starts like asking questions about menstrual cycles and stuff like that. And as the ghost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this old man ghost didn't know what those things were, and so that people kind of pointed to that as evidence that she was faking it somehow, doing this sort of guttural death metal thing for hours on end as a 10-year-old girl or however old she was. But to me, that might be kind of a weird little peek into like maybe this is sort of like the connection between the two, between our brains and our our ability to observe, and then the energy that these things use.
Well, yeah, and this is very uncomfortable, and I am in no way endorsing hoaxing, but hoaxing is a part of the whole phenomenon. Jeff Ritzman pointed it out to me, and it's 100% right. I often use Bigfoot just because that's the world I live in generally, so it's just I'm more familiar with it, but it happens in UFO too, where these really, really respected researchers will eventually get tied to some wacky hoax. People always go to the easy answer, like, oh, they're just trying to make a buck off of it. Well, yeah, maybe, but it's there's something else about it that draws this kind of fakeness out of people or something that
I think it's like ends justify the means things for some people. Like, well, okay, if I can get some funding by getting this, unfortunately, right. It's the amount of money to be spared in this for the research in here, which is next to none, and so the people that buy books on whatever your niche subject is, it's still a small amount of people.
Yeah.
And so you got to have the best juicy thing, and where's the beef, where's the evidence, but you might not be able to come up with anything tangible. So honestly, the best, and you've done really well with the Flannel Man. The best thing you do is get virgin accounts, right? From because nobody knows what the heck the Flannel Man is.
Right. Yeah.
10 years ago, nobody knew what the Hat Man was, but I think that's become popular enough now. Like 10 years ago, even just 10 years ago, just the idea of sleep paralysis, you could almost do it as a party trick, during those late nights with friends, right? You go, who's ever seen the Hat Man? And then you get two people going, wait, that's a thing,
right?
And you go, oh yeah, people see this thing, and then they start freaking out because why? And is it Jungian archetype? Why do we see these things? Why do they behave in a similar way sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
They seem shocked that they're caught. They kind of wander off and they do weird. It's weird.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I think in Bigfoot especially, sometimes there's a pressure to produce, and sometimes these guys have gotten really good evidence in the past, and they just have this sort of pressure to keep turning out good evidence, and eventually they'll do something stupid. And in their minds, it may be they might think they're helping. They may think, like, if I can draw the attention to the phenomenon, then we'll really discover what this creature is. And they seem to get the desperation comes longer they've been in the field. So as these guys get older and closer to their own demise, and they're sure it's they've spent their whole life like this is a creature, and they've doubled down on this and tripled down on it. Then that's when they get desperate, when they get to the end of their life, and they've bet any day now that's going to be, it's like the UFO guys with disclosure. It's coming this year. We'll get disclosure this year.
Yeah, well, we had that thing last December, right? With the
right, yeah,
and then to the stars, and then it all drops off, and then you get your hopes up, and then it's like,
yeah, and they're saying it again. Well, I saw an article today. I think we're going to get disclosure in 2019. like, okay, guys, like, really? No, we're not, and we're not discovering an ape in the woods in North America. It's not happening. It's a really difficult thing to settle with. If you're not willing to sit with the mystery, as Josh has said, and I think that's a wonderful way to express it. You got to be willing to sit with it. If you're not, I think you got some trouble coming, because this has been with us since the beginning of time. All these things, ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs, it's all been with us. We haven't had any answers yet.
Yeah, no, and it's I mean, I think we're maybe closer now. I think it's one of these things where as we kind of evolve and come to understand these things, we start, it's like everything gets so specific when we try to name it. But now that the different parts are starting to come together, thanks to guys like you and even the last podcast guys who I got referred through from and everything.
Yeah.
Even though they just kind of gather information and present it, in a comedic fashion, they're pretty good at kind of finding these synchronicities between all these events and everything. Yeah,
I'm actually continually impressed by the way Henry expresses things on the show.
Oh yeah, he's a big clown, but his job as a comedian, but actually he's kind of one of those guys that he's that's just sort of part of his idiom, I guess, to sort of get there. But yeah, so they brought up some of that stuff, and I mean I was a fan of a lot of that stuff anyway. But their kind of approach to some things has kind of helped open up some. It's a lot of people are doing it now, or not a lot, but a few of y'all, and so that's kind of I think is what's going to help us.
Yeah, I think that does help, and it does give me hope that the idea that people are looking at things in this sort of multi-pronged approach, where we're not three separate things anymore. I just do ghosts, and the UFO and Bigfoot people are crazy, and or I just do UFOs, and all those ghosts and Bigfoot people are crazy. The fact that we're actually coming together and going, wow, we're talking about a lot of the same things, that does give me some hope.
Yeah, like the smell of rotten eggs. Why is that a thing?
Yeah.
Was that carbon sulfide or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Like what is it? Does Bigfoot have a bad catalytic converter? Like or is it something like, is that part of the process of becoming tangible that you must like, that creates this sort of reaction in the air?
I mean, it could be. But also, apes do have stench glands. So,
well, even if you brought a screaming, like, Sasquatch in a cage, there'd still be people that would, be like, oh, that's computer generated.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because there's the school, and again, you can find the best friends in the world, but if it can be faked, then it is fake.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I remember these. I've seen the same thing where it's like, just because EVPs sound like they, just because what it sounds like is subjective doesn't mean that like the EVP itself is all that subjective. Because sometimes you get weird disembodied voices on those things.
Yeah, EVPs are another. I wrestle with them, and the ghost box thing. Like people, it's like, well, you're doing that. I'm like, well, I'm okay with that though. Like if that's me, I'm fine with that. I still think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's magic in a nutshell anyway. Like, it's when you start actually looking at it, I mean, it's a whole different discussion topic, but, kind of looking into some principles of ceremonial magic, I think is kind of useful. You don't have to practice it, but I think it's, for paranormal research, it's kind of a good thing to look at. Anything from even shamanism to, more modern magic practices.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
it's because a lot of it is based on sort of creating your own BS and thriving off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's another doorway in to what I call the other, which is, all this stuff. Meditation can be. It doesn't have to be. Just like dreams. Dreams can be. Sleep paralysis can be. I don't think they all necessarily, definitely 100% of the time are, but I think these are, gateways, possible gateways in. I think magic's certainly one, and psychedelics are very much so, or can be. Sometimes I think it depends on the application of that stuff. Same thing probably with magic. If you want to contact this stuff, and I know people who claim to on the regular. I mean, I don't know if you listen to Where Did the Road Go?
I've looked into the Facebook page a couple times, but
Ren
it'll probably make my rotation of podcasts at some point.
Ren is a regular on there, and I mean he makes regular contact with spirit entities. That's what he does. That's
well, if you got the comic book writer Grant Morrison, when he's doing Enthusia, he said that he's kind of the big. He did Happy and Invisibles, wrote a lot of Batman, so he's kind of like a he'll channel because he likes to write songs, and he'll channel like John Lennon, right? it's kind of, you become enthused with the god that is John Lennon, the godhead that is him, and then you can make us, and then you kind of get like in that mode, and you can make music like kind of sounds vaguely John Lennon-ish.
Right.
So that kind of thing happens, but it gets real weird. But my wife want to know if anybody ever reported or if you ever heard of the whole Inky shadow person thing.
I mean, not described as such, but I've just begun to sort of dip my toes into the more ghostly side of things.
Well, yeah, it kind of got dropped on you thanks to the flannel man and Zabrowski.
Yeah, well, and it took me a while to sort of come around to all these things being related. If you even read my first book, I kind of like in there, I'm like, I'm not going to tell ghost stories. It's not my thing. I left the ghost stories out of it, and I kind of regret that now. I wish, because I would have dug in more to those, because I do see it as all related. But it's taken me a while to come around to it. I'm sort of getting there naturally. In the past, probably in the past year and a half is when I really sort of started to just link all these things together with help of people like Josh, and the Where Did the Road Go family helped me a lot to sort of kind of realize that these things aren't all too different. But I just haven't dug in too much into shadow people and Hat Man and all that. I know they exist, but I just don't know that that terribly much about them.
Yeah, and I've seen the sort of you see depictions of that sort of same sort of inkiness, like, or the smokiness, I guess, whatever you want to call it. Like, you see that kind of in artist depictions of these things, like around the outside of it, like this form kind of like was formed from those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand. I don't know if they're like, I can go into like weirder areas of esotericism. Is this Oregon energy that they're feeding off of or something?
Right. Yeah.
There's so much in it. A lot of woo, I guess. Or it could not be woo. I don't know. It's just kind of one of these things where you go onto these weirder paths, which I'm always willing to go look into, just because it's like, well, William Burroughs liked Oregon energy, and he was a cool dude, I guess.
Right. All but for the killing his wife and all that,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Aside from the accidental, it seemed to mess him up bad enough. So I guess,
But let's put this out there. Let's put it out to the Strange Familiars audience. Any other accounts of these sort of inky shadow people, like was described in this episode? And we'll see what we get. It's worked with Flannel Man. Boy, do I get Flannel Man accounts.
Yeah, I don't know. It was with cold hands and everything too. It's weird, and it stayed when she gained consciousness.
I will be surprised if we don't get at least one, if not a handful of people saying, I've seen, if not the same thing, something very similar. I would be very surprised, because a lot of these things just don't seem to be isolated for whatever reason. And then you get the whole question, it's like the Slenderman thing. People made him up, but then people started seeing him.
Yeah, he said he's had sacrifices almost in his name. Like, that creates I guess in magical parlance, that creates like an egregore, right?
Yeah,
God form. Like, it has a mind of its own. Slender Man exists. He'll live longer than you or I, probably.
Yeah. And these rake things that people started, even though there are mentions of them in some earlier accounts, but people really didn't know what they were or start talking about them until very recently on the internet. And now people are seeing them all over the place. We make our own monsters. I absolutely believe that.
Which, again, it makes it sound like we're full of it when we see these things, but I don't necessarily think that's true. When you like fae, shapeshifters, or whatever they can latch onto and sort of make,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I can't even guess what the motivation is. Like, it's so foreign and so weird that it's like, if these are like extra dimensional things or something like that, like, who knows what they want?
Yeah, and they react culturally. I think, look at UFO accounts from the turn of the century. They're kind of like blimps, with propellers on them and stuff. And this is the 1890s.
Yeah,
they're saucer shaped, but they have propellers all over them, and they're silver, and or they're blimps with that are some kind of weird metallic thing. And then you get to the 50s, and they start looking like Art Deco machines. And now today, it's like more often than not you hear about plasma balls and stuff. And
saucer. I think my dad saw the cigar-shaped one. He told me about that one time, hovering over a stock tank. Like, him and his buddy were just out there, and out there fishing when they were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you get weird stuff, and I've got hear about the like, up here where I'm at, not too far, Stephenville, and apparently there's a lizard man running around there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You hear these things, and I've, And cryptids were never my bag, but now that I've just started thinking about them in terms of maybe not actually a 9-foot gorilla walking around, but these sort of like, I guess, multi-dimensional, almost, I guess the Fae is about the closest thing you can really compare them to in terms of like,
Yeah.
they've always been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every culture all over the place has these things. Like I always say, they've always lived in the woods next to us, and there's a reason they're there. And it's not because they're really good at hiding, although that may be the case. But again, I think they're fulfilling some sort of archetypal role, and then they react to us, and they do change. They seem to change culture as well. If you look at the wild man depictions from the Middle Ages, they look very kind of medieval, a lot more human. And then nowadays, probably the further we get away from nature, we probably need something wilder and wilder. And so we get these, our wild men have become even wilder. They become bigger, meaner, and more ape-like.
Yeah, and it's almost like to be seen or to be observed is sort of like the end goal in some way or another.
Yeah.
But, and it's I guess it's kind of weird, but like I said, I think it's a whole level of abstraction and weirdness. But these things, I mean, it's the similarities, especially between people that have no interest in it and haven't absorbed this culturally, right? Because even going back to it's straight up just normal everyday sleep paralysis, right? When you like I remember hearing about riding the witch choking or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember when I read that one, and these were like reports going through like in even through the 90s. And I'm just like, witches aren't scary like to kids, like probably witches haven't really been scary for kids until like maybe nowadays because they've kind of made them creepy again.
Mm-hmm.
But growing up, like for the past probably Gen X through the first batch of millennials, probably witches weren't even an afterthought. Least scary thing you could think of.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but again,
that could just be my point of view on it. But and again, if these things are just completely fabricated by what we're afraid of, right? Because if that's what the more logical and parsimonious explanation is, like a witch wouldn't be the first thing that somebody would probably fabricate in their mind as choking them, right?
Right, exactly. Like where are the zombies?
And as a kid, it'd probably when I was a kid, it'd probably be Danny DeVito from Home Alone. Like if I, that was the scariest thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I
Joe Pesci. Sorry, don't get funny.
I think culturally now, zombies would be a huge thing. You'd think, what I mean? Because it's been so embedded. Zombies and clowns, I guess.
Yeah, clowns, zombies, like these things are what you're supposed to be afraid of. But witches really hadn't been a scary thing in a long time.
I guess so. So I'm sort of projecting my own childhood on here, but I had a witch that lived in the woods next to me in a tree with local lore. So I think I had a different take on it.
Yeah, if you had that, I mean, you're up from that's that area. You got the creepy woods up there in your neck of the woods. Like, down here in Texas, you don't really get you get folk tales and stuff like that, but we're mostly flat plains up here where I am. So it's you mostly get weird stories about the reason there's a drought is because there's a buried Indian hatchet somewhere.
Right.
Something like that. You get these sort of things. And you do get ghost stories. I think around here we had Hugo's monster, which I don't know, maybe that was based on a Bigfoot sighting. I have no idea the genesis of that. Got the Lake Worth goat man.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Hugo's was just made up by that scout counselor, but apparently it was a woman's brain inside a gorilla or something like that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And of course, we were sleeping on top of where the bunker was, where Hugo's lab was that night.
Oh.
On the hill, so I don't know if all the details are right.
A little bit of on-site fear for the scouts there.
He's talented. That was a good storyteller.
Yeah, no, that is. So, well, thank you very much, and thank your wife for allowing us to hear her story.
Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate you, and I'll keep in contact. I guess the only last thing to add is was one last little synchronicity where it was kind of unusual, where I think the 23rd, right before Christmas, I was getting a fire ready, and I heard an owl hooting outside. So so which is not usual. I've lived in this town, around this town my whole life, and I think I've only seen one owl in my entire life.
How long was that from the sleep paralysis?
Just short of 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
So
that's worth noting.
Week and a half. Yeah, no, I heard it. I heard, and I tried to find it. I couldn't find it, but I heard it from the chimney. Then I went outside and heard it one more time.
There's a great horned owl that's right outside my house, and I've never seen it. It's been here for, comes and goes. It's here mostly in the winter. I'll hear it, and into the spring. And I've never seen it. I've gone out several times to look for it. It's out there. I've actually recorded it. I've stuck a microphone out the window and recorded it clear as day. But I've never actually seen the owl. So. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you.
My presentation for X-Files convention, 90 minutes.
It's a long time.
I'm scheduled for 2 hours, and I asked her, the woman who's in charge of the presentations and so forth, I asked her, like, should I be prepared for a full 2 hours? She said, well, be prepared for 90 minutes. So usually I do an hour. Actually, usually I do about 45 minutes and leave room for questions and so forth. But
things tend to take longer when you start talking.
That's what Josh said. I think I tend to rush through, not on purpose. I get
songs,
excited.
Like if you're doing songs, you go faster, I think.
Yeah, I think
But with presentations, it could go either way.
Yeah, maybe. But I finished my presentation, both of them. So once I finish this episode, get it edited, I can relax a little bit. All the interviews are done for the month. And May, we can start again. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will be back next week with another episode of Strange Familiars. As always, if you want to contact us, strangefamiliars.com or strangefamiliarspodcast@gmail.com is our email. Strange Familiars is a production of
Dark Holler Arts.
Music, books, art, podcasts, and more. darkhollerarts.com. Intro and background music is by
Stone Breath,
which you can find at stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We are also on Facebook. You can look up Strange Familiars and find us there. And we have this Strange Familiars Gathering group on Facebook as well.
She wounded him full deep. I have a golden cage at home that I would give to me. I would give to me. I won't come down, you false lady, sit upon your knee.